See them trees behind me? It means one thing. There's a time of year when a spinnerbait doesn't work, a chatterbait doesn't work, a jig doesn't work, even a worm doesn't catch fish, dude. And that time of year, I like to call it Alabama rig season, or A-rig, or umbrella rig, or whatever you want to call it. But that time of year is coming. And there's some little kind of sneaky tweaks that I've figured out living in Alabama, the home of the Alabama rig, right? And just little nuanced things to both setting it up as well as how you fish it during those cold water periods, so that you're catching fish, dude. You're not left empty-handed. So hit that like and subscribe button for me. If you guys have that hype button, go ahead and crush that for me. I could really use it, dude. All your support for the channel and just all the nice things you said, especially with my shoulder and all that. I really appreciate it, guys. But let's jump right into it. Let's show you how to set up kind of the ultimate little sneaky Alabama rig and a few tweaks and things you need to take into account before you even get started with Alabama rig fishing. God, that might be a great big one. Yeah, oh my God, dude.
That's a freaking stout one, dude, on the rigster. How about it, boys? Bro.
So first things first, we're gonna address the two biggest debates or controversies when it comes to picking an Alabama rig. And the first one is blades versus non-blades. And the other one is, what material do you want your Alabama rig made out of? Wire or these new like composite kind of formats? So there's benefits and there's takedowns to each. I probably 90–80% of the time fish an Alabama rig that has blades on it, dude. I like the blades because the goal of the Alabama rig is basically to mimic like a ball of bait or like a ball of kind of minnows, baitfish, shad, whatever you have in your lake. So I think the blades kind of make that presentation larger. It makes it look more like a school of bait. The other thing too is this rig, you're not throwing it when it's dead flat like this, right? You're not throwing it when it's bright and sunny. You're throwing it when there's some chop on the water. You're throwing it maybe when there's some stain in the water. You're throwing it when it's kind of cloudy and overcast. So it's going to have some masking. A lot of times I look at an Alabama rig kind of like a big spinnerbait, right? When would you throw that spinnerbait? And that's when you pick up that Alabama rig. So having the blades on there only add to that presentation. Exceptions, because I'll be real with you, you know, that's not always the case. If you have ultra clear water, if you have one of those sunny days, if you're trying to burn the bait, that's one kind of retrieve where the blades actually somewhat inhibit it, because basically the blades cause rise, right? Just like when you're fishing a chatterbait or a spinnerbait, those blades cause the bait to rise. If you're trying to keep that bait down, if you're trying to burn it, if you have ultra clear water, you don't want that extra flash, and the swim baits or whatever kind of trailers you put on is enough, don't go with the blades. All Alabama rigs are expensive. Some are more expensive than others. So you guys know, if you watch the videos, I love throwing this guy. It's a Picasso. It's the schoolie rig. It comes in a variety of different sizes. It is a wire form Alabama rig, right? And that's been the classic kind of composite of an Alabama rig. That's how they're made, right? It's a big spinner bait. So lately, there's been some developments with some composite kind of, it's almost like heavy duty leader material. So this is the Stealth Alabama rig. My buddy Saxton Long makes it. He's a hammer, dude, up in Tennessee. And a lot of guys on highly pressured lakes like Gunnersville, like Chickamauga is a great example, are starting to transition to these types of rigs. Now, there's upsides and there's downsides. The upsides, I can honestly tell you, they catch more fish. It has a different vibration, a different feel. The arms flex differently when you're fishing it. However, the price point is practically double what you're paying for an Alabama rig. I think it's like $49.99, $54.99. I'll put links to all these down in the description box at Tackle Warehouse so you can check them out. But the price point is up. The composite version, this Stealth version, it doesn't hang up as bad. Now, that doesn't mean you're not gonna hang it, because Alabama rig's got a bunch of hooks and all that, but I have had more success bumping this guy off of stumps, off of cover, than I have with a standard wire rig.
Holy shit, Mike. You've been way too lucky.
The other question, and this is one that I get a million times, dude, is what jig heads and what size jig heads. So I'll usually run, if I'm going deeper, it'll be 3 or 4 1/8 ounce and then 1 16th ounce, or it'll be 2 1/8 ounce and then 3 16th ounce, and I'll kind of vary there. rarely, unless I'm in a very like current oriented situation, or if I'm fishing ultra deep, do I go up to a 1/4 ounce. And the 1/4 ounce is kind of my max pretty much, dude. The other thing that's really, really important is, you know, we talk a lot about minnow fishing, fishing forward facing sonar, and it has to do with a ball head jig and that 90-degree tie on a jig head. So with an Alabama rig, I don't like that. Some guys may disagree with me, and feel free to put that down in the description box. I like a 60-degree line tie on the jig head. So the ones that I actually use are my goat heads. These are the Gambler ones. So what they actually have is that 60-degree line tie, and then they also incorporate a screw lock, which you can see on there. This is one of the most important things as well, is having some kind of screw lock keeper. I prefer that to a barbed keeper. Now, it does make the jig more expensive. However, what's nice is everything's about efficiency, right? Saving yourself headaches. With that screw lock keeper, you know, there's a lot of pressure on the baits when you're casting. Sometimes you do some pops in the reel. You know, sometimes when you catch a fish, like they slam it, bro. So like it gets the rig all kind of tangled and it gets pulled on a lot. And that means baits slide down, you get slippage, right? And the only way I found to accommodate that, as well as to preserve the life capacity or the lifespan of the baits on the rig, is to use those screw lock style hooks. It's one of the most like annoying rigs to set up, because you need the rig, you need the jig heads, you need the swim baits or whatever trailers that you're using. There's all these components that have to go in. So that means that things can go wrong on multiple different facets all the time. So the fewer things that you have to kind of upkeep or kind of keep changing, the more time and less annoyance like you're gonna have, dude. So that's kind of my philosophy with it. When it comes to trailers, this is also kind of it's not a controversy, but there's a lot of back and forth and there's a lot of debate on what the best trailer is. Traditionally, a Kitech, dude. Like, if I'm being real with you, like that's the thing that probably 90% of guys really put on an Alabama rig, and it works great. So I have a million Kitechs. They are great baits. Now, the benefits and the cons. So the benefits, it's a super soft bait. You get like really, really cold water, bro, they swim magically, right? Like they're able to kind of have that magical kick, that sort of that interesting action, that wag that just draws fish in and causes them to bite. However, the downside is they're super soft and they tear up, right? We all know that about a Kitech. One fish, two fish, and they're out. The best solution that I've found for that, to still preserve that action in cold water situations, but really have some greater durability to exponentially like more times of catching fish, closing the deal, and not having to change the bait, is these guys, dude. And it's my buddy Ryan's swim bait. So it's the cast swim bait, the Prodigy. You guys have seen me throw this a whole bunch. They're super cool because they have a little more durable plastic, but they're still soft and they still perform well in cold water situations. They're also a little more slender than like a Fat Impact, like a Kitech, and I like that. I think they get more bites personally. I think they've seen a Kitech one too many times, just like a lot of different baits. So doing something a little different makes a big difference. Plus that durability aspect is a huge play. Now, here's some funky stuff that I've been doing. Just like using that composite kind of A-rig, there's some interesting things you can do with trailers. And one of the things is minnow fishing has been such a big deal, right? So we have all these really cool minnows and fluke style baits that are out. And what we found is these fish don't need like a bait that's kicking. They don't need all this kind of tail action. Like, it doesn't take that much. A lot of times they want kind of twitchy or even just like a natural swimming motion. So some of the cool things that have come out, I did a little underwater video, I don't know, a couple videos back, if you guys want to go check it out. So there's a new Finesse series from NetBait, and it's these guys right here, and they have what I would describe as like a Huddleston wagtail. It's a much more subtle action than your standard boot tail. There's very little kind of side to side movement. It's just that tail kind of wagging back and forth. There's also another one, I think it's the Glide, the Finesse Glide. It's got like this little kind of, this is it right here. It's got that little kind of funky cilia tail. There's practically no action on it, but this little kind of kicking from this very kind of tiny flangy tail. The other thing too is using fluke style minnow baits, you know, like the Cast Echo is a great example. Like this guy, little straight tail baits, my Zoom Wings Fluke, things along those lines, the Dual Realis, the Versa, the Pintail. So baits that you normally put on your jig and minnow presentation on the back of an A-rig. When it comes to kind of fishing boot tail, like the Kitech, the Cast, whatever kind of boot tail you want to put on the back of your jig heads for that Alabama rig, I like a very consistent retrieve. And one of the reasons for that is I think the Alabama rig in concept, it's supposed to look like a ball of bait fish, right? Undisturbed, swimming through. It's not like where you're fishing a single chatterbait, you're making it react, making those fish look at it and they think it's darting away or something. In this situation, when you're fishing an A-rig, I think you're fishing around bait balls, you're fishing around basically situations where the bait's already balled up and that's the natural state of the bait, right? So if you're jerking it all around and making it dart, that bait would actually separate. If they're actually underwater getting chased, the bait's not gonna ball up, it's gonna break up. And I think when you're fishing those boot tail style baits, it's more about presenting that umbrella rig just as a whole and just reeling it nice and slow. Maybe putting a little pulsation in that retrieve, just a little bit of a kick, but you're not jerking it around, you're not making these baits dart, you just want them rolling on through, looking super natural. So last thing, we talked about the Stealth and the Picasso rigs. I would describe these guys as standard size Alabama rigs, right? And most of the time that's what you're gonna throw. There's some gigantic ones. Hog Farmer makes a gigantic one called a chandelier, right? Like super big, super like blades everywhere, RoboCop chandelier, right? So there's a time for that as well. I'm not a huge fan of throwing those. I don't want to break my arm, but guys do smash them with that. I'm sort of on the other end of the spectrum. I'll throw the standard size, like the Stealth, like my standard Picasso schoolie rig, things along those lines, but then I'll downsize from time to time. So this is a schoolie finesse rig from Picasso. And the reason I'll get these out, there's a couple reasons, but there's one really big one. So it's a very downsized presentation, right? Much shorter arms, smaller head, smaller blades, smaller snaps. And if I'm fishing around docks, kind of like the one behind me, fishing floating docks, fishing very like isolated kind of like emergent cover, that's when I like this schoolie rig, because what it allows me to do, my normal Alabama rig setup is I use a KS2, a Halo 7.5, it's a medium heavy. That's another thing. I think guys overdo rods. They'll throw them on these giant flipping sticks. You don't need all that. You want some tip in the rod, but you want some backbone. So normal setup though, 7.5, I'll throw it on 17 or 20 pound fluorocarbon, right? I don't like braid either. I know some guys go to the braid. I think braid is the only thing you use if you're fishing super heavy grass. Otherwise, fluorocarbon does the job, because when they hit a freaking A-rig, dude, they hit it like a freight train and you need something to absorb that shock. The reason I'll get out that finesse rig is I can actually fish it like a spinnerbait. Like literally it's downsized enough where you can make these little roll casts. You can be super accurate with it. You can't skip it, but you can pitch it under some of these docks or along some of these floating docks. I can also use a little like smaller and lighter rod. I actually use like a frog rod, like a 7.2 heavy that has a little softer tip on it, but it's got some backbone, and it allows me to be super accurate with that thing and just not kind of tire out when you're making these kind of very accurate kind of lined up casts to get that next to cover, to run it along docks, along posts, things along those lines. When I got up here, we hit Alabama rig season and I was like throwing a spinnerbait, throwing a chatterbait, trying to catch them on a jig and not catching dick. So I kind of had the epiphany. Some guys helped me out and they're like, dude, pick up a rig and don't put it down. And there's a time of year when that's absolutely integral for you to catch fish. And literally, dude, it's just around the corner. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I will put links to everything that we talked about, the cast swim baits, the new Stealth rig, all that stuff at Tackle Warehouse and Monster Bass down in the description box for you guys to check out. Hope you are getting out there smashing them. I got Bogster with me today and we're gonna go try to smash on them too. So we will check you later, my homies. Peace.